Hi guys, this is the narrative writing unit that we're going to be starting. I have 4 days with you essentially from now until Christmas break. So we're going to be cramming a really big unit into about 4 days of instruction because I want you to have a chance to do something really fun, and you're going to be authors writing your own books, okay? So you can decide the topic that you want to write, but you are going to follow the story arc that is going to be used in narrative writing. Okay, so for our lesson today, like I said, I'm cramming a whole unit into 4 days. So I'm going to go over a lot with you to give you enough time to work on it. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the 3 types of narrative writing, and this is on the packet in front of you. The 3 types of narrative writing. You'll be able to describe all the parts that go into a narrative story. And there's one more I didn't put on here, but you're also going to be able to describe the 3 different types of point of view that we'll go over in 6th grade. We'll talk about it more during our short stories unit, but you will know what they are by the end of this lesson. By the end of this unit, you will be able to write your own narrative story. And let's begin. So narrative writing, so it's any writing that actually tells a story. So some clues that it might be narrative writing: the story is going to have some type of characters. The story might have some dialogue, characters talking back and forth. It can be fictional. Narrative writing can be fictional, obviously, like a lot of the books we read. Narrative writing can also be true, but it has to follow a plot outline that puts the events of a story in order. So whether it's true or made up, it has to follow a story plot line. Narrative writing is different from argumentative writing, where you state a claim and you prove it with evidence. And it's different from informative writing, where you're trying to teach or inform someone about a topic. So narrative writing and informative writing could both be nonfiction. But the difference is, in informative writing, you're just going to be teaching about a topic. It doesn't have to follow that story plot mountain. Where a narrative story, if it's nonfiction or true, it still has to follow that story plot mountain where you have the events of the story in order. Okay, so we're going to go over 3 types of narrative writing. The first type of narrative writing is a personal narrative. So that's probably the kind of narrative writing you've done the most, where you share a true story from your own life. Now, again, it still has to be a story, not just a journal, not like it can't just be like a description of your dog. It would have to still be, in order for it to be a personal narrative, it would have to follow that story outline. Okay. The second type of narrative writing is biographical. So it's when the writer is sharing a true story, again, but this time it's about someone else's life. And again, that common theme is it has to follow that story arc. The third type of narrative writing that we are going to be learning about is fictional. And guys, this is in your packet too, the 3 types of narrative writing. It's when you're coming up with an invented story. This is going to be a not true story. It can be kind of outlandish and fantasy and totally crazy, or it can be realistic fiction. It could be based on something real, but you veer off and it becomes made up. So personal narrative, biographical narrative, fictional narrative, the 3 types of narrative writing. All right, so when we do, like I said, when we do our short stories unit, we'll talk a lot more about point of view and perspective and how the author develops that. But for this purpose of writing a narrative story, because you have to pick a point of view to write from, we need to go over the 3 types of point of view that we're going to be working with. So the first type of point of view is first person. And that's where a character in the story is telling it from their perspective. So they would say, I woke up, I felt hungry, I walked downstairs to the kitchen to get something to eat. Okay, they're telling it from their perspective, and they're using I, me, my, we. The second type of point of view is third person limited. So this is when the narrator is not going to be telling it from their own point of view. It's going to be a narrator kind of looking down on a character in the story and telling what's happening to that one character, just one. But in this example of third person limited, they might say, Brody woke up, he felt very hungry, so he walked downstairs to the kitchen to get something to eat. So they would use the character's name, they would say he, him, or she, her, they. It's not from their own perspective, they're describing one other person's perspective. Then we have third person omniscient. So that's similar to third person limited, where it's a narrator describing someone's point of view, except they're not just describing one character's point of view. They're kind of like all knowing. They know what's happening with each character in the book, and they're describing it from multiple characters' perspectives. So if any of you have read the book Refugee, where they have Mahmoud and Joseph and Isabel, and they have the three different characters, and they kind of switch whose point of view they're following, that would be an example of third person omniscient. Okay, it's similar to third person limited, except instead of describing one person's point of view, they'd be describing many. So those are the 3 points of view. Now, when you write a narrative story, you're going to get to pick the point of view that you want to write from. So it's kind of cool. You get to decide, are you going to tell it from the first person perspective? Are you going to tell it as a narrator describing someone else? The thing you have to remember, it doesn't matter which one you pick, but whatever one you pick, you need to stick with it through your whole story. Okay? So a personal narrative is describing events that have happened to you. You should probably use a first person narrator. A fictional or biographical narrative can be written using first or third person narrators. We are going to be writing a fictional narrative, so you could do either. I want to talk to you a little bit too about perspective. So this is an example of 2 perspectives, okay? 2 perspectives that you could write from. They both use first person point of view. In the first one, a girl named Alyssa is writing about getting a puppy for her birthday. It's the first person. She says, I got Marley on my 7th birthday. My parents handed me a big box with a red bow. The lid had little holes in it. Oddly, the box seemed to be moving. I eagerly opened it to find the cutest, most cuddly puppy. I adore him. So it's told in the first person, and it's from Alyssa's perspective, the little girl. The next example here is told from Marley's perspective, the dog. It still is the first person narrative, okay? First person point of view. It's from the character's point of view, but the perspective is different. It's from the dog's perspective. I'll never forget the day I met my girl, Alyssa. She squealed when she saw me, and that scared me a bit and made me squirm out of her arms. But then she scratched me behind the ears just the way I like, and I knew she was the girl for me. I licked her hands to thank her, and they were yummy, just like the food Alyssa calls chicken nuggets. I was a lucky dog all night. So here it shows first person point of view in both of these examples, describing the same situation. One is from Alyssa's perspective, one is from Marley's perspective. So you can think about the point of view you want to write, first person, third person limited, third person omniscient, but you can also think about what perspective. Are you going to talk from a person's perspective? Are you going to talk from an animal's perspective? I mean, if you've ever read the book Wish Tree, that book is told from the perspective of a tree. So the perspective is different than the point of view. All right. So there are parts of a narrative that we want to include when we write our stories. The first we've spent a lot of time with, and that is making sure we set up our setting, the where, the when, that the narrative is taking place, okay? And we know when we talk about setting, we're also going to be describing it where the reader gets a feel for the mood, okay? Second thing, you want to make sure you have characters. They can be people, animals, any kind of creatures, but they're going to be involved in the story. You're going to make sure you have your protagonist, okay? Our hero, our main character can have positive and negative traits. Our antagonist, the one that's up against our hero, our protagonist, they're going to be the character or the force causing the problem. So be thinking through how you want to set up your protagonist and antagonist. The third thing it has to have, we talked about this a little bit, but it has to have, and you can follow along in your packet, but the third thing it has to have is a plot. So we've talked about plot already. You're going to start with that exposition where you set up your character, your setting, your conflict. You're giving background information that we need to know before we read your story. Then there's going to be some kind of incident that happens that kind of starts the story. And then you're going to have your rising action that builds up to the climax, your falling action, and then the resolution where you tell how your story ends. Okay. You also, like we talked about, you need to make sure that you set up your point of view, the perspective from which the narrative is told. And then you're going to want to try to work in some dialogue. Okay, so the dialogue of your characters are the actual words that they're speaking out loud. Okay, here is the narrative flow chart that we're going to use today to start brainstorming what we want to include in our story. So this is in here too for you to look at. So box 1, you're going to think about, all right, this is your exposition. This is where you introduce your characters, the background, the setting, the mood of the story. Is it going to be a creepy story? Is it going to be a happy ending, cheerful, positive story? Is it going to be, well, you can think about it. We've talked about mood for a few weeks now. Then start to plan out what is going to be the event 1 that happens. This is going to be where you're really maybe introducing the conflict of your story and maybe your antagonist. Then event 2, you're going to talk about the next kind of major event that's happening to your main character. And you can have a couple more events as well, but at least a couple. And then event 3, we're going to think about what is the climax of your story? What is the turning point? Like the big event that kind of changes everything around. And then finally, your conclusion. How are you going to resolve your story? How are you going to have it end? Okay. So this is what you're going to start to brainstorm today. And this is the assignment where I have it. I have this posted in Google Classroom. Okay. Under narrative writing unit, it should be at the top of your classwork page. For right now, I just want you to start to brainstorm through, maybe with a partner, if you can do that, what you would include in each of these boxes. So start to brainstorm out loud what you would include. When you've kind of talked through your exposition, your 3 events leading up to your climax and your conclusion, then you can start to type that into this document. Each box, if I go out of presentation mode, you can see each box can be typed in, so you can start to make some notes about what you want to include here. The other parts of this assignment we will go over next class, planning out a character and thinking about how we want to hook our reader at the beginning of a story and how we want to create a setting and a mood. So we'll go more in depth with that next class. But right now, today in this class, depending on how much time you have, I would like you to start to brainstorm with a partner what you want to include in your story. And then if you have time, you can fill out this slide number 2 in this document. Let me show you where it is in your Google Classroom. You click on classwork. It's at the top of your classwork page under narrative writing unit. Okay, you're going to work on this in class with me or just that first slide today. And that's it. So you can message me with questions. This is not an assignment I'm expecting you to work on at home. Okay? All right. Be creative. Start to think about what you want to include in your story. And no, we are going to be making these into an actual book. We're going to be putting the papers together, stapling them together, creating a cover. You're going to be creating the illustrations. Make it fun, make it interesting. And we will be producing real books. Okay? So you guys can be authors, editors, illustrators, book publishers. You're going to do the whole thing from start to finish. All right. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.